toxic gas and rubber bullets.
What we witness on the ground is not different from what we practiced previously, but it's been extended through the toxic gases and use of poisoning gas. So if this Mr. John is contributing, we should see positive things at the ground. What we see till today is nothing acceptable.
It may not just be British tactics Bahrain's using, but weapons too. Government figures show the UK sold over £1 million worth of rifles and artillery equipment to Bahrain from July to September last year, long after blood was spilled. That's despite insisting all licences had been revoked. As for Yates, his contract runs until April, by which time he hopes to have put in place concrete reforms. On this evidence, that seems a long way off. Ivor Bennett, RT, London.
Well, Middle East expert Tariq Ali says that different attitudes world powers are taking to Bahrain's uprising are easily explained by how useful the regime is to them.
Those countries which are regarded as allies of the West or stooges of the West are basically not criticized regularly. It's not just the Gulf states or Bahrain in particular. It is also countries like Yemen, whose brutal dictatorial former president is currently in the United States receiving medical treatment. There were demonstrations in Saudi Arabia a few days ago which got very little coverage. Of course, the Saudis have no democracy at all. It is probably the most undemocratic country in the entire Arab world. No one talks about this because it's a useful country. It has oil and it does what the West asks. Their intervention in Bahrain was green-lighted by the United States, which is very strong in that principality, and they crushed the uprising.
Well, Tariq Ali has also provided us with some insight on the current crisis in Syria. A special interview with him is on air later this hour. But before that, here's what else is coming up in the programme. Turkey wants to keep out of the economic war on Iran, deciding to protect its national interests by continuing to import Iranian oil. A blast has ripped through an oil pipeline in the Syrian city of Homs, where clashes between regime troops and opposition fighters have continued for over a week. Thick smoke can be seen hanging over the city. Activists say the explosion was caused by a government airstrike. Meanwhile, reports suggest the army has sent tanks, which are attacking residential areas, into the country's fourth largest city of Hama. But with information hard to verify, there are concerns that some want only the regime painted in a bad light, not the opposition.
Since the beginning of the uprising in Syria last March, the regime of Bashar al-Assad have been accused of repression, torture and killing. But with the bombardment of homes, blame has since focused on Assad's forces attacking civilians and shelling residential areas. Nabil Fayyad calls himself a member of the opposition, an intellectual, not a revolutionary one, he stresses. From a social democratic group, originally from Homs, he blames Assad for mistakes which allowed bloodshed at the start, but he justifies what the regime is doing in his native city now.
He is trying to protect the civilians. I think that in Homs there are many gangs. You know, there is a title, and everyone can claim that he belongs to this title, and no one can ban him.
The danger posed by the armed anti-Assad forces was seen in the killing of a French journalist last month, Nabil says.
When he went to Homs, he put in his mind that the Syrian opposition is very peaceful, and the regime is trying to defame them. So he was like a pioneer in the group, and he was killed by some gang.
Attacks on government targets have become increasingly bloody themselves, with 28 people killed and scores injured on an attack on a military base in Aleppo last week. An FSA, Free Syrian Army representative, admitted responsibility before the organization later denied it, blaming government forces, a claim ridiculed by the regime.
Insurgents and terrorists have committed this attack. Only an insane person could say that the government is killing its officials and officers and destroying its own administrative buildings. These armed terror groups were created to commit these crimes, and they have committed them in the past and will continue to do so if the West and the Arab states support them.
Last Sunday, the Arab League voted to offer full political and financial support for the opposition, urging it to unify its ranks. It echoes a similar call from the leader of Al-Qaeda, urging Muslims to unite efforts to help overthrow Bashar al-Assad. Recent reports suggest Iraqi weapons, Qatari troops and Libyan rebels are rolling Syria on the opposition side. This makes for a volatile and highly dangerous mix, warns some.
Many Western powers interested in fomenting unrest in Syria, and so they'll turn a blind eye to extreme weapons coming in through borders like Lebanon and Turkey to create these very militant, I won't call them terrorists, but very dangerous armed groups.
But the West has its eyes wide open when it comes to the reported death toll. The commonly known UN figure of more than 5,000 implies civilians only. But that figure leaves out any mention of pro-government forces killed in the conflict. Some say the numbers are distorted to meet political objectives.
Our number so far around 6,000. But you will be surprised to know that over 2,800 from the army. And this is documented.
Foreign pressure has focused on the Assad regime, but the Syrian government and its international supporters say there's been a total failure to acknowledge violence from opposition forces, which has been a key factor in the country's present turmoil. They warn that finding a solution to the country's crisis isn't possible without recognizing all its causes. Marie Finoshna, RT, Damascus, Syria.
Well, for Maria Finoshna's first-hand reports and impressions from inside Syria, just check out her Twitter feed. In her latest tweet, she says locals are sceptical about the latest Arab League initiatives to bring in peacekeepers and deeply concerned about Al-Qaeda militants allegedly fighting in the country. Well, Patrick Hayes, a reporter for the online magazine Spiked, told RT that some major players are rejecting peaceful solutions for Syria and polarising an already complex situation.
The removal of diplomats from Syria, the desire to arm the Free Syrian Army from the West and to basically support them, to give them kind of sectioned off training areas where they can develop a strong opposition apart from the kind of threat of Assad, all suggests that the West isn't willing to have encourage any kind of dialogue or discourse at all. Ultimately, they want to they've now polarised the situation. They've now said Assad is evil, we need to get rid of him. They use those kind of terms, evil, as if he's like this ogre or bogeyman. And, the Syrian people are vulnerable victims who need to be protected by the West. Now, I think we saw the same thing with Gaddafi, and it's always very striking that, it was only 2 years ago that Assad was seen as the great reformer in Syria. The West were basically queuing up to talk to him.
Well, Asia Times correspondent Pepe Escobar says, unlike Libya, Syria won't fall under Western influence through intervention because it has a stronger position in the region.
Well, the stakes in Syria are so much higher compared to Libya because this is a direct clash between the US and NATO on one side and Russia and China on the other side, much more than it was in Libya. In Libya, Russia and China, and even the other BRICS, and Germany as well, they said, okay, maybe this is not the red line yet. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, the French, the Brits, and the Americans. The country was destroyed. Syria, you cannot do that because, first of all, they're going to have to fight a real army, even if they are not very competent, but they are battle-hardened. They've been to wars in the Middle East, the Syrian army. It's a smaller country, there's more population. You cannot simply, a land invasion is out of the question because it would go all over the place, the repercussions to Turkey, to Jordan, to Iraq, to Saudi Arabia. So NATO's plan is to foment civil war, and that's exactly what they are doing.
Well, China's stance on Syria also